Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to help you decide whether Cossacks 3 is the right real-time strategy game for you. By the end of this video, you will know what it's like to actually play this game to help you make an informed decision. I'm not a Cossacks 3 fanboy, just a strategy fan who took a chance on this game so I could report back with my findings to you, my fellow generals. First, give me 30 seconds to describe the game in a nutshell. If you're still intrigued after that, we'll go into more detail about how the game plays, the mechanics, and how it compares to other games you may have played. If Age of Empires and Rise of Nations put aside their differences and had a baby, then pumped it full of steroids, you'd get Cossacks 3. It's a traditional RTS, there are 6 different resources, and there's base building, but everything is on a massive scale, with thousands, literally thousands of troops on screen, stabbing and shooting each other in gloriously organised formations. RTS fans will find Cossacks 3 easy to pick up, with recognisable systems right off the bat, but there are some genuinely interesting mechanics that are like a breath of fresh air and give the game an identity of its own. The game was first released in September 2016, has mostly positive reviews on Steam, and can be picked up for a very reasonable price in the sale. But is it the right kind of strategy game for you? Let's take a look at the big picture. Then if you're still interested, we'll dive into more detail to help you make a decision. Now let's pretend you've just purchased the game and fired it up. Let's see what the game looks like when you first log in. We have a very angry looking Cossack man, who doesn't look best pleased that we're rummaging through his menu. You'll see we have a campaign, which is subdivided into different campaigns, and each of these is made up of different missions, so we have plenty of historic single-player content here. Then where it says multiplayer is the online multiplayer. Random map is actually the skirmish mode, more on that later. We of course have the tutorial, which we'll dive into momentarily, the usual load game and load replay options, an encyclopedia detailing the statistics for each unit of each nation and sub-options to include upgrades. There's the settings menu, which is self-explanatory, the mods workshop, which takes you to an external web page, and finally, we have the editor, which is a way of creating your own maps with a stupid amount of units, and it's just utter carnage. With first impressions out of the way, you're most likely to look for the tutorial, and boy, are you in for a treat. The first tutorial takes you through how the economy works, and the second takes you through the fighting. It's a slick setup that prepares you well without taking long at all. A well thought through tutorial with some humour sprinkled on top. Lovely jubbly. With the tutorial out of the way, it's time to discuss the setting of Cossacks 3. Europe in the 17th and 18th century is the quickest way to describe it, but if that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, hold on a minute, because the way they've done it is pretty awesome. You have your traditional European powers such as France and England, but you also have a great focus on Eastern European nations, and even the Venetians before Italy became a nation state. It comes down to this. If you like medieval warfare, there are plenty of swords and pikes as well as cavalry. But for those who prefer guns and explosions, there are also muskets and cannons in abundance. There is something for everyone here, so don't let the 17th and 18th century thing necessarily put you off. Now let's take a look at the main game mechanics compared with other RTSs before diving into detailed gameplay. On the face of it, the mechanics are very typical RTS. You start with some peasants. Build up your base so you can collect each of the 6 resources, being food, wood, stone, gold, iron, and coal. You build your unit production buildings, and of course there are a ton of upgrades to be had too. So far, very normal. But this is what makes Cossacks a bit different to, say, Age of Empires. You get to the fighting very quickly. It doesn't take long to build your first unit production buildings, so you can churn out an army, which is a good thing, as the population limit on this game is insane. It's literally in the thousands for each player, so it makes sense that units are quick and cheap to produce. How you control such a massive army is something we'll discuss in a moment. It's one of the best parts of the game. There are a lot of technologies to research, many of which remind me of Age of Empires by making farms and wood chopping more efficient, but thankfully most are confined to a few buildings, so they're quick and easy to locate and keep track of. You start the game in the 17th century, where muskets are easily overpowered by melee units. However, once you've built enough buildings, you can progress to the 18th century, where muskets become far more deadly and a more dominant force on the battlefield. Also, I don't think I've ever had this much fun with cannons and flanking enemy formations with cavalry. Although cannons can be destroyed, you can also capture them, by just being close by. So a successful flank or winning a battle could result in you adding some of your enemy's cannons to your own. You can also capture certain buildings and peasants in a similar fashion, so leave your gold mine undefended at your own risk. A final note on sea battles, if that's your sort of thing, they do exist with increasingly large warships, transport ships for your troops, and fishing boats for your food economy. Naval battles are satisfying, and you always have that feeling of dread when you have 3 fully loaded transport ships in the middle of the ocean, praying to God a fleet of enemy warships don't appear on the horizon to sink your ships along with your army. There's nothing too special about the sea battles, but ships of the line are big, powerful, and they just look really cool. As the armies are so humongous, how do you manage them? Some of the best aspects of Cossacks 3 are in the formations. You can create an officer and a drummer boy. No, really, there are drummer boys. You select the officer and click to create a formation from the men around him. Let's say you happen to have 36 pikemen nearby, they would form a tight square and work as one. 36 is the smallest formation, next up would be 72, then 120, 196, and finally 400. So you can't have a formation of 50, it would have to be 36 until you get enough to make it 72. And if that wasn't enough, you can order them to physically change formation, which actually makes a difference in a battle. It doesn't just make them slightly more effective, it actually boosts their attack and defense stats, so it's a no-brainer. Line formation is great for muskets, a column formation is great for pikes to soak up a cavalry charge, and forming square is fantastic as you can fit cannons inside the square to protect them, and you can use it for infantry to defend against cavalry. A nice bit of historic accuracy there. You can't, however, form these units with cavalry. They're controlled in the more traditional RTS way. There are also stances which not only affect how the units behave, but can change their stats too, such as stand ground, making infantry far tougher, but sacrificing their maneuverability. All of this makes it possible to control an army of thousands in a way that not only looks good, but changes their stats to suit the situation and generally kicks some ass. This is honestly some of the best fun I've had with RTS battles, and you'll pick it all up in minutes. I'm pleased to report that there are walls in Cossacks 3, so if you like building and defending a base, you can build wooden or stone walls with gates, and you can build deadly towers containing upgradable cannons. Normal units cannot damage walls or buildings, only cannons can, which makes sense. There's no guy with a sword slowly bringing down a 10-meter high stone wall by stabbing it. Sadly, you can't walk on the walls, but if walls are your thing, you can build some big defenses. Cannons are not guaranteed to hit a wall or tower every time. A single cannon can be infuriatingly inaccurate, but once you get a bunch of them together, they can destroy walls, towers, and units quickly by sheer weight of numbers, and their accuracy and power are both upgradable. Looking at resource management, as I said earlier, there are 6 resources: food, wood, stone, gold, iron, and coal. On a standard game, each will be easily accessible, but you may need to expand a bit to find more gold, iron, and coal. Food is straightforward compared to Rise of Nations or Age of Empires. There are no deadly dances with wild boars that can lose you the game before it's even started. You build a mill which comes with fields, and you simply allocate loads of peasants to the fields, which can be upgraded several times to increase efficiency. Wood and stone are easily collected and deposited in a logical way. And then we have mines for gold, iron, and coal. You build a mine over the obvious pictures and allocate 5 peasants to work there. Then you have the choice of scouting for even more mines or upgrading the ones you have. Upgrading your mines to fit a significantly larger number of peasants is a decent alternative to expansion, where most other RTS games force you to expand as the only real viable option. You can genuinely consider investing in what you already have. In the long run you might lose, but playing tall is certainly more feasible than in other RTS games. As always, balance is everything. Gold is incredibly important throughout the game, so much so that the market will be in constant use to trade for it. A common tactic is to stockpile stone and constantly trade it for more gold to fuel your upgrades. Certain units require upkeep costs, so you can find your resources going down if you're not careful. And I love the fact that when your cannons fire, they consume iron and coal. They also stop firing when you run out of gold, so there are a few economic layers to consider before pulling the trigger. Are you interested so far? In a moment, I'll describe the various game modes this game has to offer, but first, now we've looked at the big picture, let's examine the nations and their respective units you'll be taking into battle. Having purchased the base game, you have a healthy choice of 20 different nations, but if you want to play as Scotland, you'll need to purchase the Guardians of the Highlands expansion. Each nation is broadly the same, but with subtle differences in their economies or technology trees, and the occasional unique unit, such as the utterly awesome Polish winged hussars. This makes it easy to switch nations, as they generally play the same way, but with just enough differences to keep things feeling fresh, as opposed to a game like StarCraft where you have 3 entirely different factions that each require a PhD to play properly. Looking at the units, you get pikemen, you get muskets, plus a variety of cavalry with different strengths and weaknesses, as well as cannons of different shapes and sizes to suit different tasks. The diplomatic centre is perhaps the most interesting unit production building, as it's a place to recruit mercenaries, usually associated with different countries, that adds a bit of spice to your own army. At first glance, there aren't a huge number of different unit types, which reduces the learning curve, but when you look a little deeper, the unique units and mercenaries in particular give you a diverse army and provide an added layer of depth, if that's what you're looking for. Pikes are strong against cavalry, musketeers are strong against pikes, and cavalry are strong against musketeers. On the face of it, the counters are simple, but when you scratch the surface, you'll see there are 6 different damage resistance types that can be upgraded. So there is a complex system of counters under the hood of this game. But here's the thing. As a new player, you don't feel the game is particularly punishing you for not knowing this level of detail. Of course, if you have a deep knowledge of the resistance types, you'll play a more efficient game, but you don't feel like you're getting smacked in the face for getting it wrong. The end result of all of this is a huge battle. Thousands of soldiers in tight formations, moving up to 400 troops with a single click, and of course you can hotkey an attack move as standard. Artillery can be so devastating against troops, and it's incredibly satisfying to flank with your cavalry to rout the enemy musketeers. The game allows you to fight big battles within minutes, and throughout the game you'll be slamming hundreds, if not thousands of troops together in fields of smoke and devastating cannon fire. It is fucking brilliant. I read somewhere a player saying that you use infantry to hold ground and cavalry to take it, which is a great way of explaining how this system works. We have to take a second to mention the sound effects. The ambient noises are genuinely absorbing. Some of the sounds are annoying, such as selecting a peasant, but then I'd sound like that if someone ordered me to go build them a house or go down some random mineshaft for coal. It's a shame there isn't a voiceover for the campaign, so there's a lot of reading between missions, but the ambient music is genuinely great at sucking you into the 17th century European countryside. A quick note on music, it's okay. For the first 5 minutes, the energy it brings is perfect, but after a while, it's like that one friend everyone has who's happy all of the time, and it's just like, shut up. No, really, it's fine, but a bit much at times. Moving on to graphics, for an RTS, it looks great. Nothing groundbreaking, but I've noticed these huge battles don't stress my PC at all, so they seem to have successfully balanced making the game look pretty without melting my potato system. You have to tick a box, but you can zoom out surprisingly far to view the battlefield, which is a welcome feature, but you can't swing the camera around to view the battlefield from different angles. The game doesn't stray far from the typical RTS game modes. It has a varied campaign which doesn't blow me away in the same way Gates of Hell Ostfront did, but it's got a certain charm to the interaction between the various characters that could be described as witty banter, and enough missions to keep you busy for a long time. The skirmish mode is as you would expect it to be, so I won't dwell on the subject. I suspect most players will play skirmishes against the AI, and Cossacks 3 certainly allows you to do that, with plenty of options to tweak in the settings. There is of course online multiplayer with a reasonably active player base for an RTS game, and finally the editor mode, which can be used as a self-educational tool, or just a place to let the shit hit the fan. I've played this game for a little over 15 hours now, and this is what I would say to somebody considering purchasing the game. The gentle learning curve has left me feeling able to play the basics to a decent standard, so if you're concerned about having a lack of time to invest in a game, Cossacks 3 is a good choice. The campaign explores some interesting historic aspects of the time, such as the English Civil War, Although it doesn't reach the dizzying heights of Age of Empires 4's campaign, it's enjoyable and replayable, even if I'm not in a rush to finish each campaign. Honestly, the attraction lies in the big battles that can take place less than 5 minutes into a game. There's a convenience factor there, which means I will likely come back at some point in a few months because I've developed an itch for huge pitched battles involving dragoons, pikemen and a shit ton of cannons that only Cossacks 3 can scratch. So how much is this game going to cost you? $19.99, £14.99 and €19.99, and it's regularly on a 60% sale. This includes the previous 4 DLCs, but you'd have to pay a little bit extra for the expansion if you're desperate to play as Scotland, which, to be fair, does look pretty awesome. Ach no. It's a competitive price which positions Cossacks 3 as an RTS you have to at least consider if you're looking for something new. So should you buy this game? It depends who you are and why you're looking for a new game. If you're looking for an RTS game to play with a friend or friends, and they aren't too experienced with RTS games, I would 100% recommend Cossacks 3. The low learning curve and the insanely huge battles makes it perfect as a pick up and put down kind of game, or an introduction into the genre, as it does a little bit of everything economically and with its battles, and it does it all in a refined and slick way. However, if you are a keen RTS gamer, perhaps you've played Rise of Nations or Age of Empires 2 for years, you might find that the initial charm that this game certainly has will wear off. And when it does, you may find this game doesn't challenge you in the way you're used to. I'm not saying that this is an easy game to master, quite the opposite, but for the serious RTS gamer, Cossacks 3 could easily be a new game that complements the ones you already have, rather than replacing them. Honestly, 90% of gamers will find this game an enjoyable experience that's easy to pick up when you fancy commanding thousands of troops in a ridiculous battle. It's some of the best fun I've had in RTS, and I do not regret my purchase, particularly as it was in the sale. And it's nice to play an RTS that's still receiving updates from the developers. If you have any specific questions, please let me know in the comments below. If you're an experienced player who thinks I've missed something important or just want to share your experience, please do so in the comments to help potential players decide if Cossacks 3 is the right fit for them. If you found this video useful, please feel free to check out my others, as there are plenty more where this came from. See ya.